So it's really great to have you here today. My name's Annabelle Munson. I'm your host and moderator today. All right, so let's go ahead and get moving. So by very popular demand, we're adding to our COVID operational information. You know, you currently, hopefully, receive our weekly emails on the subject that have been very popular, and we've gotten a ton of feedback. One of those was, hey, how can we get more of this? And how can we talk to your experts directly? That's our goal today for the next 30 minutes. We're going to highlight what's new and what's making news this week regarding COVID era operations, focus on emerging trends, and answer some of your questions. So with that in mind, I'd like to, if at all possible, take a second and collect a little feedback from you to start. So I'm going to share a poll with you that is specific to international operations, which is definitely the theme of our conversation today. So you now have the option to answer this poll. There are two questions. How many international trips do you expect to make between now and the end of the year? And then the second question, which is a multiple choice answer, what regions do you expect to target with those missions between now? Again, we're kind of targeting between now and before we get to January. I'll give everyone another, say, 20, 30 seconds. Ooh, lots of answers. Great, thank you, keep this coming. The majority of our group, so let me go ahead and end the poll and let's look at what the trends show us. Okay, I'm going to share this with you. So you should be seeing this on your screen. All right, how many international trips do you expect to make between now and the end of the year? The vast majority of you are in that category of that 2 to 4. So getting back into the air and some missions, but still a little bit slow, not surprisingly considering where we are. Great to see that breakdown, but there is another significant group still looking at that 10 plus, so getting back to business, that's good to hear. And then regional, where are you going? What parts of the world? You know, heavy domestic still, US, Canada, Europe, definitely the winner here, which is not surprising. We've been hearing a lot of that and a lot of requests to help get into Europe. So we're going to have some questions related to that today. So hopefully that helps as well. Great. Good deal. So let's keep moving and get to the main event. Let me introduce you to our speakers today. So first we have Christine Vamvakas, Senior Account Manager with Universal, 20 years veteran with the company and of the business aviation industry with deep operational expertise in both private and charter. And then Adam Hartley, which many of you may recognize from his many opportunities to speak as a guest at NBAA. And then as well as being a member of and a highly important feature in this Schedulers and Dispatchers Committee. So Adam is the manager of our very respected and important Global Regulatory Services team. So we're super pleased to have them here. They are going to provide some of their insights. I should say too, those weekly emails that you have been getting from your account managers, both Christine and Adam have been integral parts of putting that information together, sharing it with your account management team so they can craft those updates to you. So you have been benefiting from their information from the beginning of this change in our world. All right, so Christine, I'm going to go ahead and start with you. What's at the top of your COVID hit list right now? What's making news and impacting trips for your clients?
Thank you for that, Annabelle. So what I'm going to talk to you about today are hot trends, kind of what's going on over the last week or two. I'll do that by region just because we're limited on time. So I'm going to start with the APAC region. So traditionally, since this started, it's been really closed up until recently when we heard news specifically about Beijing potentially opening for business jet flights for international arrivals. So after checking with our office in civil aviation, unfortunately, this is still just a rumor. I do hope it changes in the near future, but we're going to keep an eye out for that. One positive move that we did see is that China is allowing effective September 28th that if you have a valid visa for a resident permit for a reunion or urgent matters that you may be able to travel. Then the other country to look out for this region is Japan. They recently allowed flights going to and from Singapore. As of tomorrow, they are permitting flights to and from South Korea. We spoke to our office out there. We did hear rumors that the US may be added to this list. Again, these are just rumors, but I'm hoping that materializes in the near future. The next region I will be touching on is for Europe. Of course, that is one of the hot topics based on the poll today. What I'm finding for Europe is that it's either for tourism or for essential business. Of course, we're at the latter part of tourism, and that's been focused primarily on Croatia and Turkey, Turkey being part of the European region, not the Union. The only other country that's been open to leisure is getting through to France via a third country, and specifically for Luton. So since this started, we've been traditionally going through Luton because of the paperwork, quick turn, and then from there into France. What we have found is that customs in France have been asking questions and making passengers uncomfortable. So from this point on, what we're recommending is that you go through Luton overnight, complete the paperwork, and then proceed to France. What this does is it doesn't put your passengers in an uncomfortable position. When they get asked that question, what were you doing in the UK? The answer would be simply, I made an overnight stop in London. So outside of that, what we're looking at for essential business is that it's open. There are options. What we need to do here is look at substantiating that essential business, and that can be done by documentation that we send in advance and gain approval prior to entry. The important thing to think about here is that you have to have flexibility. So each country within the Schengen zone, when this originally started, they had a cohesive look about things that when you entered the zone, that you could easily, or more easily rather, transition from one country to another. What we've seen recently is that because COVID numbers are increasing in different countries within the Schengen zone, each country is enacting a safe and an unsafe corridor. So these countries, even though they're part of the same zone, may not permit that you travel there from departing one of those high COVID number countries. So that may require that you flip-flop your schedule around just to make it work. A great example of this is I had a client recently that was wanting to go from the US direct to Poland for business, and then from there to Denmark. Poland does not permit US direct flights, but through Denmark, we were able to accomplish that, and then we were able to get them from Denmark to Poland. So that was a successful result in that situation. Outside of Europe, we're looking at the Caribbean and Mexico. Mexico has been a hotspot for GA traffic. It's relatively easy to get into as far as completing a couple of health forms and then proceeding as you would for your destination. On the other hand, as far as the Caribbean is concerned, a lot of country nations have enacted different regulations. They've seen COVID numbers going up and down, and for that reason, they keep changing. The thing to consider here is that COVID testing is your golden ticket. You're looking at an average between 48 and 72 hours prior to arrival. Outside of that, you have to complete an online health application or a visa. And then when you enter that country, a lot of these regulators are requiring that you have a tracer app installed. And in some cases, they'll give you a tracer bracelet or a button that you have to carry with you. And last but not least, I'm going to hit on Latin America. They have been closed since this first started, but over the last few weeks, we've seen it open. There's a number of countries that are now permitting travel into popular destinations. Examples of that is Costa Rica, Colombia, Peru, and Belize. And of course, you're seeing different entry requirements. An example of that would be Costa Rica. For US nationals, if you are one of the approved list based on the state that you reside in, you can come in. You have to prove that with a driver's license. If you're not on that approved list, you would have to look at seeing if you could get permission. If not, don't fret. They're looking at October 15th of adding Texas, Florida, and Georgia to the list. And as of November 1st, all US nationals will be permitted in. The only additional item to consider is COVID testing 72 hours prior to arrival, and then your health application visa. And the one last thing to note about Costa Rica is they also want health insurance. So that's an item that you're going to have to acquire. Then you look at Peru. If you like to do a direct flight, they're wanting you to get an invitation letter through the Chancellery. That, of course, has to go through the passenger and those diplomatic channels. But what we've found out is that Peru's regulations is by departure point. So they have a list of approved countries that if you transition from, you no longer need those permits. So namely, Colombia and Panama, if you make a tech stop and then you proceed from there to Peru, then you don't have to go through that process and you go through your normal permit and handling requirements. So that's all I got for now.
That's all? Well, I'll jump in there too, Annabelle. You know, I appreciate Christine kind of taking on the entire world for us and leaving me with just the USA, but there's a lot going on in the US that we need to cover as well. But really, when we're talking about flexibility and operating under COVID, this is kind of a step process for me. First, you're complying with the regs, then you're managing your risk, making sure you're utilizing all of your resources out there to create operational flexibility, giving yourself some opportunity to do contingency planning, and then pull all of those things together, ideally to give you some confidence to execute that mission. So I'm going to talk about some of the major challenges here in the US and some additional challenges, and then some of the programs that we have here in this country to help mitigate some of those issues. So obviously the major challenge is still foreign nationals who have spent any time in the past 14 days, so their 14-day travel history in suspended regions. Under presidential proclamation, China, Schengen, UK, Ireland, Iran, and Brazil. If you have been in any of those places as a foreign national in the past 14 days, you are suspended, highly restricted from accessing the United States. There are some common exemptions. So the most common, obviously, are familial relations to US citizens or permanent residents. There are diplomatic exemptions for those carrying diplomatic passports or diplomatic clearances from the U.S. State Department. And then there's some other more operational exemptions like crew exemptions for active crew or exemptions to move or ferry a commercial crew. Some of the additional challenges that we're seeing from COVID here in the U.S., besides just the fact that the foreign nationals are having such an issue getting into the country, and we'll talk about another path as well with the national interest waivers here in a second. But some of the additional challenges that we're all feeling is, number one, U.S. visas for presidential proclamations new visas were suspended. There are still a lot of visa types that are not being renewed before the end of the year. So there's a major challenge there if your operation is carrying foreign nationals. Fortunately, the U.S. has the signatory carrier program, a visa waiver program, which is an awesome tool to help combat this. Another program another issue that we're seeing or challenge that we're seeing based on COVID is changing lead times. Doesn't necessarily mean longer or shorter, but changing. So you need to check with your specific locations. A good example of this is a place like Van Nuys, restricted going from a available 2-week lead time, shrinking down to around a 48-hour lead time. But we've also seen ports go in the exact opposite direction. We used to have a short availability or short notice availability, asking for longer lead times as well. You've also seen effect on resources in CBP. So overtime and officers and those kind of things are less right now. A good example, Los Angeles, KLAX is only available from 0700 to 2300 local. That's a major port with a lot of resources. So if they're being affected, you know that some of the smaller ports, specifically some of those smaller GA ports, which have less resources, less officers, less overtime, are really going to face some challenges. And that's not going to be in the short term, I don't think. There is another tool that's out there. CBP provides the RSP program, reimbursable services program, so that you can book overtime and pay for overtime in advance. So another tool that you should look, or another tool in the toolbox out there that you can use to create more operational flexibility for you. That last one that I mentioned, the national interest waiver, I'll spend a little time there. So if you have a foreign national who has spent time in a foreign or in a suspended region and they are restricted, you can apply for a national interest waiver. And that channel initially or primarily is through the State Department at your local consulate or the traveler's local consulate or embassy. What we've seen very recently is that there's a path through Department of Homeland Security and CBP at a couple ports to make those applications locally. LAX is one, Newark, DFW, JFK, and George Bush Intercontinental right here in Houston, Texas. The same kind of documentation is required. So valid travel documents, obviously we got to take care of the basics, right? We'll talk more about those basics, but valid travel documents, a good purpose. So why is this, what's the business purpose? Why is it urgent or emergent? And what's the impact that the specific traveler is going to have on that situation? So even though we may be asking questions at a local level, we're still meeting a very high bar as far as the type of travelers or the type of circumstances that may be approved through this local channel. There is an issue with local approvals, and that is that NIWs have a national, or the suspension is a national suspension. So we really want to work very closely with CBP in these ports if we are exercising these NIWs, and work with them locally so that we don't end up as a target for the National Targeting Center or another national entity that is reviewing travelers in APIS and looking for suspended travelers. We don't want local to tell us yes, and then at the last minute national to tell us no. So it takes some coordination, but Universal can help you navigate that. Last, I would say for you as citizens going abroad, so venturing out into the world, that the scary world that, or at least complicated, if not scary, right? That Christine described to us, and that's the STEP program, Smart Traveler Enrollment Program through the U.S. State Department. Makes you a known entity in foreign states to the consulate and embassy there, so that if you have emergency situations or need resources, there's a lot of ways the State Department can help you abroad in the world. So I would really look, will Universal and GRS be talking about that more, but I'd recommend any operator traveling abroad with Americans look into that program. And with that,
Yes.
I'll kick it back to you, Annabelle.
Thanks, Adam. Okay, so we really did cover a lot. And the good news is, based on some of the questions that we had already received, you've covered some of those. But I have a couple of requests that came in earlier that I want to make sure we touch on. What are some of the biggest mistakes or gotchas that you're seeing? Christine, I think you mentioned a couple yesterday. Can you share one or two?
Yeah, one of the things I'm seeing is that because people aren't traveling right now internationally, one of the things they may not be looking at is the passport validity. So a lot of different countries require that you have validity beyond the departure point out of that country. Europe, I think, is about the 3-month period, so you need to look at that. If not, go ahead and apply for a new passport. The other thing to consider is securing your COVID testing. Because a lot of these countries are requiring it at your home base, it's best to go ahead and have just a trusted source where you can get that within that 48 to 72 hours prior to arrival. If not, and you guys do need help with that, here in the US, please let us know, let your account manager know, and we can see if we can help you secure something.
Great.
I think that's and I want to come on the back of that real quick, Annabelle, because I think passports as a document, a travel document, is a good example of this. But when I said, let's think about our basics, some of the stuff with all of these new COVID requirements, there's a little bit of COVID tunnel vision that you're trying to climb all of these new mountains to get to the top, right? And I think sometimes we're leaving some of those basics behind. So making sure that your aircraft registration hasn't expired while you've been reduced or suspended your own flying, or if you've had furloughed individuals in your flight department who may have been responsible for the documentation for a particular aircraft. Filling those gaps to make sure you have good travel documents, valid medicals, valid ATPs, worldwide insurance, all of that stuff. You know, getting back to basics is really important here too.
Yeah, it sounds like we should put that under best practices no matter what right now, in addition to climbing the new COVID mountain. So another question that came in that I know we haven't touched on it so far, specifically North America, US, Canada, Mexico travel corridors. Adam, what's the latest there?
So the U.S.-Mexico essential travel bans, essentially, it went into effect back early on, April or May, have been applied differently by the three countries. So you've had Mexico, who's been very rigid at the border, so at the land border crossing specifically, but not applying any of these restrictions to air travel. You have the U.S., which has been fairly open all along, as long as somebody is in compliance with presidential proclamations and has all of their other documentation. And then you have Canada, who has been very rigid, continues to be very rigid. I had somebody reach out to me the other day that was trying to set up their arrival into Vancouver, and they were doing a DIY trip and said, you know, CanPass is asking me all sorts of crazy stuff. And, what's going on? And I said, COVID is going on. Which means that, you know, even those simplest trips, taking a couple of Canadians or a couple of Americans up to Canada has become complicated, and that there's additional information you have to gather and provide to authorities before you can go. And that has not changed in Canada. It's still a highly restrictive environment.
Great. Now I have another part of the world that apparently a rumor has started to circulate that Japan may be opening up soon. Christine, what have you heard about that?
I think I mentioned it earlier. So right now the U.S. is, there's a rumor that the U.S. will be added to that safe list. We spoke to Civil Aviation, JSAB, but right now that's not the case, but we're hoping that materializes very soon.
And I know we can rely on our people on the ground there to be keeping us honest on that with our information to you. All right, I'd like to, because I know we're getting some questions in, Lewis has been monitoring. Let's use these last few minutes to specifically talk about what our live audience has on their minds. Lewis, do you have some questions we can share with the experts?
Yeah, thanks, Annabelle. We got a couple of regional questions specific to different destinations. So Christine, Adam, if you could talk, starting with the Mediterranean, what are the restrictions we see in Greece and some of the other Med countries? I'll throw in also, we've gotten some questions about Costa Rica and what the latest restrictions are there as well.
Now for the Mediterranean, it's been pretty much locked down, except for Croatia, which just requires that 48-hour prior to arrival COVID test. And of course, you have to confirm your hotel and all that good information. Italy will allow you in if it's for essential business. You have to substantiate that. What that will allow you to do is come in 120 hours, quarantine free, complete your business and depart. There are other ways of entering Italy, but you have to be in the Schengen zone for 14 days and then come to Italy to avoid any quarantine. Greece, unfortunately, is not available to any US nationals. The only exception to that would be is if you had obtained diplomatic approval for essential business. Of course, you have to go through those channels, get that approval, and then we can look at doing the rest. And then Turkey. Turkey's been open just as it was before without many requirements. As far as Costa Rica, I think I mentioned that earlier. It is restricted now for US nationals depending on the approved states, which you have to provide your driver's license. However, effective November 1st, all US nationals will be permitted to enter with following the COVID test, the insurance, and the health application form.
And Christine, one more region real quick that we had gotten a question on was the UK. What's the latest going on there?
So the UK currently, as it's always been, if you're looking to enter the UK, if it's from the US or any of the non-approved corridors, they have a list that keeps rotating and updating quite frequently. I mean, there have been cases where I've seen 2 and 3 countries added in a couple of days. What that means is that when you go into the UK, you have to quarantine for 14 days, unless you're there for 3 days and you quarantine for that amount of time. So after that 14-day period, you can go about your business. There's an exemption list, but it's very finite. It's very specific. And as of this moment, I haven't been able to gain an exemption for any travel there. And then you have to keep your eye on that list. What's valid today, tomorrow may change rather, overnight.
Right. And Lewis, I know you've got a couple more. I know we're about to be at time, but for those of you who can continue with us for a few more minutes, we're happy to continue on and answer some of these questions that we received today. Like I said, we will have a recording of this session that'll go out at the end of the week, as well as a transcript from the chat that we received with questions. So for anyone that can continue on, we'll keep going for a few more minutes. Thanks. Lewis, go ahead.
Thanks, Annabelle. Adam, we got a question for you. Can you talk about what if someone's only travel was in a suspended country if it was a tech stop? So they want to come to the US, but they've been a tech stop in a suspended country. Are they allowed?
And unfortunately, the regulation doesn't allow for any difference. So the regulation calls for any person who is physically present in a suspended region in the past 14 days. So there's no mitigating circumstances or details beyond that. And so a tech stop would still count as a stop in a region. So even if somebody's only doing a tech stop, they still have to then navigate in a national interest waiver or be in one of the exemptions.
Got it. Kind of next question, I think Adam, you can probably answer this one too. What's the likelihood of something like the national interest waiver being a way into the US?
Yeah, I think it's a great path, and I've spent a lot of time through COVID and working with CBP on these different varieties of national interest waivers and kind of paths that they were considering to open up. And all I can say is that it's an opportunity, right? So you want to make sure you bring solid documentation. We want to tell that story of the importance of that travel, the importance of that traveler. Not only, hey, this is a plane full of people who are coming to do something important, but an NIW is issued not to an aircraft, not as a permit, but to individual travelers. So we want to fortify those travelers with solid documentation to show how important it is that they make that urgent or emergent trip. And you know, we've seen some success.
Christine, I'm gonna rapid fire a couple locations at you right now. We've got some questions about Singapore, the Netherlands, and Dominican Republic.
My understanding, based on the latest, is as far as signatures concerned, Singapore is concerned, it's still restricted for U.S. nationals. They do have what they call the fast track pass, but that's only within the APAC region. So I think they just approved China. There were a few other countries on that list. For or for U.S. nationals, that's still not a viable option. The Dominican Republic, if I'm not mistaken, entry is open. My understanding is that no COVID test is required, but they may do a random test upon arrival. And then the Netherlands, that's going to be on a case-to-case basis. So the Netherlands being part of the Schengen zone, it's not open for U.S. nationals. However, if a case can be made for essential business, we can look and see if we can gain approval. I've gained approval in the past, so it has been an option, but because things are changing quite frequently in that region, we would have to look at specific scenarios. So I would need to know what type of the essential business it is, to have documentation from the receiving party, preferably in their local language, written out with the schedule, the crew, what the purpose is, signed by that person on the letterhead. And then I would submit that and trying to get approval from the police there. So that's a case-by-case basis.
And I think Netherlands was the last one.
Yeah, that was the Netherlands.
Oh, I'm sorry, missed it. Okay, so we got a scenario here. Someone wants to know if they wanted to go from the States to France for a 3-day stay and then return with a tech stop in Iceland.
The question bears, is it U.S. nationals? For the return, I'll let Adam get into that. But going over to France, if you're looking to go direct, it's one of only 5 purposes. One of them being diplomatic, or if your primary residence is there. So direct is not really a viable option. You have to go through a third country. So that's either a Schengen zone or the UK. The UK is the only viable option unless you have essential business in the Schengen zone. So it's through Luton, overnight, go to France, and then return through Iceland, and Adam can take the rest.
Yeah, like she said, nationalities are key. Nationalities, obviously, travel history is bad. You know, if we're going from France to Iceland and back, that's all suspended. So American citizens, familiar relations to American citizens would be okay. Foreign nationals without any exemption or NIW would be restricted.
It was another scenario here someone posed. Can a U.S. citizen go to South Korea and then on to Japan? Would that be allowed?
I would have to look at that right now, because what they're doing is they're restricting nationals, right? So it's not just your departure point, it's your nationality. So unless there could be an exemption for the purpose of the flight, if it's government business or something along those lines, I would say that we would have to really look into that one.
Thanks. I got a question about testing, COVID testing. So what are your recommendations for making the test documentation as useful as possible? Are specific countries requiring like passport and driver's license number on the test results?
So different countries have found that there are persons that may arrive with fake ones. And as such, they've put more scrutiny on it. So what we're recommending is that, of course, it's always a PCR test, not an antigen test or anything else. And on that test result, I always recommend that you put the full name of the person as it's given on the travel document, the passport number and expiration date, date of birth, and nationality. That allows the officer on arrival to review it and make sure that it matches the passport. It just removes any ambiguity or concern.
Thanks. Another country that somebody asked about was Germany. What's the latest going on there, Christine?
So Germany has been restricted. For U.S. nationals, of course, you can't do direct entry unless you have that essential business. I recently had an operator go there direct from the US because it was, as it pertains to business, they were getting hired on to a German company there. Also, I've had aircraft go through into France via that Luton stop, and then from France go into Germany. The only stipulation currently is that when you're in the Schengen zone, because of where you may be coming from, you may have to do a PCR test on arrival at the airport, and then you would have to wait for those results. So right now, that it is an option for operators.
Thanks, Christine. Adam, we got a question about Peterborough. Basically, just the regulations seem to change every 2 weeks or so. Do you have any update on Peterborough and other U.S. airports?
What I would say is that if the changes are coming rapid fire for us, and that the changes are coming rapid fire for the regulators and the officers and stuff as well, and we've focused a lot of our inquiries when it comes to what's acceptable and what's not acceptable through headquarters and those kind of paths. We try to stay away from local opinions on things if at all possible. So if you're hearing something from a local duty officer and you don't think it sounds right, I'd certainly like to hear about it, and I could see what I could do to help. But I don't know of anything specific in Peterborough that's changed recently. Obviously, they've still got overtime restrictions and those kind of things. But no other specific changes right now.
Adam, another question I think you can address. Have we seen delays in getting visas, not just in the U.S., but overseas as well?
Yeah, so like I mentioned, U.S. visas are heavily suspended in some for specific visa types. There are a couple of special interest type visas that are being approved, but big delays on the U.S. visa side. And that's, Christine could probably tell us more, but that's the same kind of thing we're seeing abroad. As COVID has affected staffing, it's affected the processes of how they manage these documents. So we're seeing that, kind of through the entire regulatory environment, that things like visas and travel docs and those absolute trip killers, you can't delay. You have to assume that countries you're wanting to go to have current delays and try to get out that much farther ahead of it.
Yeah, and to add on to what Adam was just saying, a lot of countries around the world have suspended all visas, including the ones that were valid even for tech stops. So it's very important to check to see if you can still use them. Even after they say they're reenacted, you may have to double check that with your embassy, or they have new requirements. So Thailand just issued a notice this morning that for people that are looking to go there for tourism, they're only permitting long-term tourism. So these visas will only be approved if they're within the 90 to 270 day arrival. They want you, I guess, there for a while. And in order to do that, you have to confirm that, you're going to stay for 14 days at a hospital. Not really what I'd like to do, but you have to meet all these new requirements. So, and the lead time is a lot longer. So it's something definitely to check into.
Thanks, Christine. If everybody's got time, we'll take one more that just came in. Colombia, I know it recently opened. Can you talk more about that, Christine?
My understanding is that Colombia is open for operations. I know that originally they had specific airports that they were permitting persons into, but my understanding is it's open to operate to. And
one more was Hawaii.
So Hawaii, they've had this pre-test arrival that they've been talking about for a few months now. It's had subsequent delays. I would say I've seen it on a 2-week period, just keep pushing forward. The latest that I've heard is that it will go into effect on October 15th. I'm thinking that this time it may be the way to go. And with that, if you do that COVID test within the time frame that they allot, and you provide that to them in advance, then that will permit you to omit that 14-day quarantine on the islands.
And we did get one last one, if everybody has time. Adam, you talked about, I saw in the chat some people talking about the STEP program, but what other programs would be beneficial at this time people should look into?
The other two that I mentioned now, the RSP program. RSP is not an ASAP thing. That's not something you're gonna be able to get done overnight. But having additional flexibility for more customs hours or having an additional route to obtain that overtime is a really good one. Visa waiver program, since the U.S. visa issues have really gone into effect, we've processed a ton of those, and it's just a fantastic program. So without getting too far off in the weeds, I'd stick, and of course, STEP. I really love that as a risk management tool when American citizens are out abroad.
Great, thanks. Annabelle, I think we covered all the questions we've got, so I'll turn it back over to you.
Thank you. Well, and thank you for that. Thank you, Lewis. And thank you for all of these questions and for everyone staying engaged. I did have one, and I don't know if I missed this somehow, but I thought it was a really great and interesting gotcha that someone shared with us on the chat about finding that upon arrival, their temperatures are being taken after they have a long walk across the ramp in the sun, and everyone has a, quote, fever for a few minutes, and that it's getting difficult sometimes to get staff to just wait a moment to let everyone cool down after making the trek across the ramp. So that is, I mean, speaking of gotchas, that this is the new world of interesting variables to deal with that I'm sure you never thought you'd have to. So thank you for sharing that. Okay, well, I know we ran a few minutes over, but I really want to thank, it looks like most of our group stayed for the extra time in the questions, and this is what makes it.
Thank y'all.
Well, this is what makes it real, and as you know, this is our first go round. We definitely look at, we're going to be doing this on a recurring basis, we hope about twice a month. And clearly topics will change a bit as we get new information about COVID era operations, and we can start specializing as well. But your feedback's going to be important to this, so definitely anything you want to see, send us an email at operationalinsight@univ-wea.com. That's operational insight, the complete words, at univ-wea.com, and I'll include that in your information that you'll get with this chat transcript with these answers as well as the recording. So I can't thank you enough for being a part of our inaugural group, and I hope this has been beneficial to you. Thank you to Christine and Adam and to the entire COVID operations team that's working in the background. All right, everyone, have a great rest of your day or evening, and I will hopefully see you in about 2 weeks. Thank you. Bye-bye.
Take care, everyone.